Alright, Kiss Army, welcome to the KissFAQ podcast. Thank you for letting us into your head. I hope we don't do any damage. This is a Kiss-related podcast by the board, for the board. We hope you enjoy. Welcome to episode 11 of the KissFAQ podcast. Joining me today, or rejoining me, are Alex, bagboy on the message board, Jay, who's music guy, and Lonnie, stlkiss. So thank you guys for joining the podcast again. And I keep hearing funny sounds in the background today from Skype, so you'll probably get to hear them too. Today's topic is going to be, well, before we get to that, just like to show everyone Kiss Exposed.
Sweet!
I do own a copy, so I do know that it does have the 1982 video of I Love It Loud. But, trying to think of that stuff off the top of your head when you watch so much stuff, I can't remember. And even though people see me surfing the internet while we're recording these, you can't always fact check yourself perfectly. So we talk, we make errors, we deny them later. So today's topic is Peter Criss and the music of Peter Criss before, during, and after Kiss. So let's just jump straight in at the beginning. The earliest stuff of Peter Criss that circulates out there is him with his garage band, the Barracudas, circa 1966. The single was released in January 67, according to Lydia Criss, when she put a bunch of this stuff up for auction with Backstage Auctions. And let's just start this show with a little clip from, I think it's, I don't know which side it is, A or B, Affection, from that single. Okay, 1960s, definitely. B-sides to that is I'm So Lonely, which you'd be very lonely playing that music. Peter's not the singer on those. It's a guy called Carlos Cancel, also the guitarist and songwriter. So, guys, I'm going to throw it out to you. Early Peter Criss. I take it you've heard all this stuff before?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's very typical of the era. Nothing particularly, extraordinary about it. It's your sort of run-of-the-mill frat boy music from the late 60s. Lots of Farfisa organ. And, you also hear that, I think, in the band that he Sounds of Soul? Yeah. It's just very typical. Nothing particularly great about it. It's not bad. It's just kind of forgettable.
It's originals, at least. Which, unlike the stuff that, I guess all this blends into one thing. 66, he's in Barracudas. 67, he moves into Sounds of Soul, which includes most of the guys he played with for the rest of the 60s. Number one, Joey Lucenti, was the primary songwriter. The Sounds of Soul stuff that circulates, I actually won all those acetates at that auction, so we got Respect, and a couple of other cover songs. Joey still has the originals acetate, so they actually recorded 3 songs, apparently, of their own material, which no one's ever heard, or at least I haven't heard. Bastards. So I'm going to play a little bit of one of the songs, and what really dates it's probably my favorite one, just because it's a really damn good song. So here's a little bit of Sounds of Soul for everyone. All right, so obviously that's the Otis Redding arrangement of Respect. Alex, thoughts?
Music's very, I I need to go get a milkshake now, and go get a girl in a poodle skirt and head up the drive-in. I was listening to him before I came on today, and good stuff. I mean, it's not bad music. It's definitely very that period. Nothing. If I was to play that and go, "Do you know the drummer is going to be in Kiss, man?" Like, I don't think anybody would believe it. But it's just, to me, it seems very generic. But I mean, it wasn't terrible.
No, I don't. It's a cover band. They're playing they're playing shows like so many other bands. We know they've got originals, but they've got their meat and potatoes catalog. This is 1967, 1968. What year did Otis's version of Respect come out, or Aretha's? It's right in the era. Actually, it's before Aretha's because it doesn't have that fantastic arrangement that she killed the song with. This makes me want to go and watch the Blues Brothers. Lonnie, thoughts on all this early pre-Chelsea Peter Criss?
It's fine. It's nothing that I'm gonna listen to more than once at a time, and very far in between times while I seek out to listen to some early Peter Criss stuff from the '60s. But it's not something I'm gonna put on my iPod and go for a run on or something like that either.
I was going to ask you, that's not what you jam to when you're doing your marathon?
Makes me push them out. And it's fine. It's nothing that really excites me. It's very, like you guys were saying, it's very standard for the time, but it's nothing extraordinary.
Yeah, and the other two songs that circulate from Sounds of Soul are Since I Fell For You, which is Buddy Johnson's song for Lenny Welch, 1963. I mean, that's just way before my time, even if I call myself a Beatles fan. And My Girl, which, of course, has a recurring theme in Kisstory, having been covered by Frelly's Comet. So that's the end of Sounds of Soul. There's some great photos. Again, all this stuff that we're going to talk about should be up on YouTube. People just share that stuff all over the place. The Barracudas, the B-side was It's Been So Long, not I'm So Lonely, which is, of course, Creation with Eric Carr. And there's a second single that the Barracudas put out, and I've never been able to find out if it's actually Peter on those ones. It's Chicken and No Use, which are really kind of novelty type singles, which are so common in the 60s. Lydia didn't know. Peter denied all knowledge of it. Actually, I think he said it was going to be in the book, but it wasn't. So that's
bitching in between.
To kind of cruise through this really early Peter stuff. The last kind of song that we really know about is What Is a Man by The Vintage. I'm not going to play it because it's just so crap quality. The acetate looked like it had been chewed on by a dog for a couple of years. So it was really beyond the point of salvage. That's one that hopefully the master tapes still exist from, but after that there's Chelsea. Thoughts on Chelsea, guys? And let's talk about the album first before we kind of nail the second album demos.
I like one song on the album, and that is Silver Lining, which incidentally is I think Michael Benga gets writing credit on that one, and it's very reminiscent of a song some folks might know called My White Bicycle, which was originally done by Tomorrow, later covered by Nazareth. But it's definitely, I would say, probably the only true legit potential single on that entire album. I think the most of it, or the rest of it, it's kind of generic. Again, I don't think the songwriting's particularly strong. And it's just weird. It doesn't even sound like Peter playing drums. And I've noticed that kind of a recurring theme with a lot of those pre-Kiss bands, Lips included, that, the jazzy feel that Peter is known for, especially in his early years with Kiss, are completely not evident in any of those pre-Kiss recordings, which sometimes makes me question whether or not Peter was actually playing on some of that stuff, or maybe that swing style just was something that didn't fit in anything else that he had done prior to Kiss, and maybe Kiss was sort of his entrance into that style of playing. But I didn't hear it anyway.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. Something I've never really thought about. Silver Lining is written by the two now deceased guys, guitarist Chris, also co-wrote that with Michael Benvenga. I don't think I can actually pick a song on that I really get excited about. I think the last time I played the album was when I got a mint copy of it and I wanted to rip it, and that's it. It got burned to CDR and never again to be played. Alex, any positive thoughts?
It was a nice record to listen to because Peter Criss was on it. It was more or less like listening to it just because he was on to say I listened to it, and that's really about it. I mean, that's it. I'm sorry, Peter.
Yeah, but it's no worse than Wicked Lester, is it really? If you kind of think about it as a number one, Peter's not artistically really invested in that project. It's the Mike Brand, Peter Shepley project.
Yeah.
And that needs to be made very clear. Those two had been together for years. They'd been in the others, I think, in Rhode Island at university together. They'd recorded 3 singles. They were songwriters. They were apparently hippies as well, judging by the amount of marijuana that must have been smoked to write songs like Rolling Along and All American Boy.
Hard rock music.
Which was anything but hard, anything but rock,
Right.
and even music is stretching it. So, I guess it's steeped in the era, though, of the psychedelic, or pseudo-psychedelic.
It fits really well into the time frame that it was produced and it was made, though. It's definitely with a late 60s, early 70s vibe to it with what was popular at the time. And I listened to the album today at my desk just as background noise, and I hadn't listened to it for quite a while. And that's what it really turned into for me, was just background noise. And it's nothing that excites me, just like the other stuff. And to your point too, it just happens to be like that type of band at the time, and Peter Criss just happens to be the drummer on it. And it really doesn't sound like Peter Criss, like Jay was saying. And it doesn't have like a Peter Criss signature on it. The album really doesn't to me at all. Right. But I think Rolling Along is a decent song. And
Yeah, it's got a little bit of a vibe to it, I think. At least
a little
bit of feel to it. But other than that, the album just doesn't do a whole lot for me. It's just not my style.
Of course, it's got an arrangement of Polyvon from the Peter Paul and Mary album, traditional song, but that's about it. Hard rock music turns up on a sampler. I guess that would have been the single had there been a single, but a failure.
I think they just lacked focus. Obviously the songwriting itself isn't particularly strong, but there's a little bit of country in there. There's a little bit of folk, some feeble attempts at hard rock, a little bit of psych thrown in the mix. So it's really nothing in particular. It's just very bland.
It needed Bob Ezrin.
Yeah. But Bob would have been all over that.
Sent Peter back to camp.
So after Chelsea, they Criss departs and Stan Pendridge comes in, the late Stan Pendridge, and they do a bunch of demos. Stuff called Red Green, Darling, or also known as Darling with the Stars Above, You Make Me Feel. It's still pretty prototypical hippie stuff, and all the demos are basically them with a tape recorder just beside them, acoustic guitars. Peter's got a set of congas, so there's no drumming. It's just like guys sitting in a circle on the carpet with illicit substances, jamming out some tunes, like so many bands have done. Do you think that had they made a second album, it would have been any different from the first?
I don't know. I don't think Stan Pendridge is necessarily a fantastic songwriter to begin with, but I definitely think he had a better sense of creating a hook than the two guys that were primary writers on the first record. I could see the possibility that the second effort might have might have one-upped the first, but then again, that's setting the bar kind of low, since we've all kind of agreed that the first one wasn't exactly a mind blower to begin with. But now, are we talking about, because I'm a little unclear, I've heard some of these prototype versions of some of these songs that would eventually wind up on Peter's solo album. And I know that those sound very like recorded in a bedroom, not really produced. Do those come from the same sessions that you're referring to, or is this lips that we're talking about?
No, those are all lips. The ones that turned up on Peter's album. These bedroom recordings are the Chelsea ones, and apparently, according to Stan, the ones that we have, which I think came from him in the 90s anyway, were actually recorded in the studio. Whether that was Mom's garage, or I think they actually did go into a proper studio, so it's just that the quality's pretty bad on them. So, I think the Chelsea demos are a little bit more promising. I think Stan, while not at this time a fantastic songwriter, at least from any of the material that we have, and we don't know who was responsible for these songs, but I think from his later work, he could have been a good foil for Peter and Peter Shepley and Mike Brand. Maybe that third point of view to say, whoa, your arrangement sucks here. Well, you probably shouldn't say that to a songwriter, but he could have helped. I think. Yeah, it could have worked on the arrangement so the songs made them better. So that Chelsea stuff. Then you get into the lip stuff, and obviously Beck is going to be the number one, pre-Kiss demos of any importance. Baby Driver was apparently demoed as I've never heard that. So Don't You Let Me Down, Dirty Livin', allegedly, You're My Woman. And Don't Let the Blues Surround You. I mean, that's pretty much all of the lip stuff. And Don't You Let Me Down was...
That's kind of Sugar Papa like.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Hooked on Rock and Roll as well. So, and I'm Gonna Love You. And that's the kind of Sugar Papa like. So, we know. I guess we don't need to talk about the stuff that turns up on Peter's solo album quite yet. But Beck, oh my God, is there any difference to you guys on that song, really, in what it was in 1970, 71, 72, than Beth, apart from a different name?
I mean, you can see the origins of the song. I think, when you face the music with Paul down, he kind of felt like Bob Ezra kind of wrote the whole thing in a way. But you can definitely see where it came from. To what input Peter and Stan had with the song. I don't know, I wasn't there, but I'm glad they changed. I'm glad they made the arrangement they did for the story compared to the Beck version. The Beck kind of reminds me of I remember I got I think it's called the complete story of Three Dog Night, and they had some early demos on there, Three Dog Night, and Danny Hutton and stuff like that. And I definitely had that feel. So I'm glad they changed it up a bit.
So I don't think you can give Bob that much credit for Beth. The melody, structurally, once you've got the melody, for me, and I don't know, professional songwriters may agree or disagree. Once you've got the melody, that's the essence of the song. The words are secondary to the melody.
The blueprint for it is definitely there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all right there, and I think Bob tweaked it and shined it up a little bit, but it's all there. And the first time I heard that and I came across it, I was like, as much as Paul wants to rip Peter, in Paul's book, he always says, well, I really don't know how much involvement Peter really had in that song, because
I doubt Peter had much.
You can write one song, you can write one number one hit, you can write another. Well, that's not necessarily true. How many one-hit wonders have come and gone over the years? That's really not responsible saying that, because it's all right there. I mean, we don't know how much involvement Peter had in it, how much involvement Stan had, but in that arrangement, that song's there, and it was polished up for Destroyer and made what we know it today.
Yeah, and we know Peter didn't have a ton of involvement in it. He, by his own admission, has said that he felt the songs that he wrote for Love Gun, Hooligan primarily, was the first song he'd actually properly co-written with Stan. So we know this is more Stan. And we also know how the business works, in that if you want to get your music recorded, sometimes you do a deal. And that means allowing someone to put their name on a song. And we just talked about Creatures last week. Gene gets his name on a Bachman Turner Overdrive song. Simply, like that.
Even John Regan mentioned that too with that song off Second Fighting too. That song that
the Steelheart song.
Yeah.
So it's the business. I've got a little bit of lips queued up here actually. So here's just a few seconds of "Don't Let the Blues Surround You."
I'll be ready.
Okay, the cats are caterwauling. It's a little bit painful, but you know what? It's no more painful than some of the crap I record and play back and sing. It's just ideas. You're getting ideas down on tapes, whether or not they ever make it to a proper stage. I don't know how much of this stuff actually would have ever made it to a further stage. So,
I'm actually. I'll be the first to raise my hand and admit that I actually like some of the lip stuff, particularly the stuff that wound up on Peter's solo album several years later. Some of the versions of those are pretty groovy, and the singer's got kind of, he's not a real flashy singer. I don't know if that's Stan singing or not. But, I think, that's the kind of sugar Papa likes. I think that first version with lips is just awesome. I actually really like it. I definitely think there was that's probably the most potential in any of Peter's pre-Kiss bands would be lips, at least in my opinion. I think the songwriting's stronger. Of course, we didn't get the benefit of a properly produced record like we did with Chelsea, but I would be interested to hear maybe better quality versions of some of those recordings that Lips did, because I think some of it's actually decent. I wouldn't necessarily throw it on my iPod and run a marathon, but it's actually not so bad, man.
No, it was good enough to recycle in 1978. Here's a little bit of "That's the Kind of Sugar Papa Likes." Get groovy, dudes.
Oh. I didn't want you, did not need you, sure was me to kick you down. But now I love you, I'm thinking of you, I sure do wish you'd come around. 'Cause you're the kind of sugar Papa likes, and when you do it drives me crazy. And I don't know if I'm up or down, lost or found with you.
All right. So you can hear Peter in the background there. That's Stan on lead vocals. Peter's clearly on backgrounds. And I'm going to, because of the 78 stuff, I love Hooked on Rock and Roll. Whether it's 78 or whether it's 1972 or whenever it was originally recorded. I think that's just a really good song. So
I agree.
Well, I tell you, I know Peter's not really recording, but I tell you, if he was to do a single and do some of these songs acoustic guitar with just a little snare drum or whatnot, I think it'd be cool singles again. And I do that style. I like the kind of twingy kind of acoustic guitar that was going on there. So
yeah, that's actually an awesome idea. Peter Criss, out there, if you're listening, Record Store Day, find someone who can play acoustic guitar, get up on a stool, and record a couple of acoustic versions of Hooked on Rock and Roll and That's the Sugar. Easy.
Fans would eat it up.
Oh yeah.
Eat it up.
No, that I'd actually love to see Peter do some acoustic stuff. Just intimate acoustic show would be kind of fun with some of this stuff. And I think a lot of Kiss fans with 1978 hearing that stuff back then, it didn't work. But as we get older, I know certainly I can listen to the album now. And I'm talking about Peter's solo album, I can listen to it with different ears than I did back when I was first getting into the band in 85 to 86, 87. Back then I had no reference point for that stuff. I mean, even my parents' music wasn't anything like that. So do we get 3 thumbs up for Peter Criss? Go record some acoustic stuff?
Oh, fans would eat it up.
I say 6 thumbs up, 8 thumbs up.
Yeah, I think fans would just like to know he's still there. So, after Lips, I don't think I even want to mention the Death Rattle and Roll session because that's just so out there, and I still don't know if I believe the story. So, Kiss music. Peter Criss, Kiss music, guys. And I'm not sure how to handle this as a topic. Favorites. What are your thoughts on Peter's contributions? You know, his songs. So I guess we can do the songs that he sung and the songs that he wrote.
Well, he wrote, I think I tallied it up, he wrote a whole 4 songs that ended up on Kiss Records. Is that right? Between Beth, Baby Driver, Hooligan, Dirty Livin', and that's it. I don't think there's another one that he wrote.
Nope. That's pretty sparse pickings. Pick a favorite.
Baby Driver would be my favorite song that he wrote for Kiss, for sure. As far as in writing goes, but I mean, his contributions obviously to Kiss are so much more than the 4 songs that he penned for the band, between his drumming and then his vocals on Black Diamond, his vocals on even Nothing to Lose. I love his vocals on the live version of Nothing to Lose and the studio version. Both of them are great, and I think it's interesting that on the first album, there's 3 songs Peter sings on, if you include Kissin' Time. And, you know, there's 2 on Hotter Than Hell, and then, you know, it gets down to the 1 per album. And, you know, it makes you think, too, that, well, was the relationship with Peter early on very strong that, you know, that he was given 3 tracks on the first album, if you include Kissin' Time. And, you know, then gradually kind of less on. You can kind of see maybe, without digging too deep, what was going on within the band, that, you know, his contribution for what he was singing became less and less. Is just very, very clearly in black and white.
Alex, what would be your favorite of his 4 written or co-written songs?
I liked it because one of the first I got was in middle school was I didn't think of Dynasty, so I loved Dirty Living. But then there was this cool website I went to called KissFAQ.com. I don't know if you've heard of it or not.
That's suspect.
And they had like all of a demo section. They had like little 30-second clips. And I remember hearing the clip of the Dirty Living demo, and I felt like that arrangement style was so much better. But I've always liked Dirty Living, and I like Hooligan too. Especially, you know, if you guys got the Kiss My Ass DVD or the Kissologies that they do Hooligan Live, I thought it was a great track. Almost like a hidden gem from the live era then.
What about you, Jay?
Well, definitely as far as co-written would be Baby Driver all the way. I think that song's just got a ton of atmosphere. I think the guitar tones in it are just killer, and I think that's probably Peter's best vocal turn in a Kiss song. Unless you're looking at Beth, which, when you think about the stuff that Peter sang on Kiss Records, he really doesn't sound anything like the other songs, the way he sings Beth. It's very different from which I'm sure probably is some production wizardry going on there with Bob Ezrin and probably a lot of vocal coaching. But other than that, you know, I think Baby Driver is far and away my favorite Peter Criss co-written song. And I'd have to say probably my favorite of his songs that he's sung. Maybe up there with Strange Ways, too.
I think I'd like to find out how many takes of Beth it took in the studio and whether they comped it together out of 600 different vocal takes or whether it was just one straight take that they picked or just, you know, comp from a couple. So I'd really love to, that'd be a good question for Bob or for Peter, actually, because I'm sure he'd remember. And I'm glad 2 of you said Baby Driver because I love Baby Driver. Obviously, it's off my favorite album, but just the vibe. You know, it's really a pulsating, like kind of throbbing song that really, you know, I just love it. You know, it was so different than most of the other material. And getting back to what Alex said about Dirty Living, yeah, the original demo, Peter said that they ruined it when they recorded it with Kiss. And I love the original version, the background vocals on that. So that's a great one for some people to go out and check out, as well as his other demos on that. For his best vocal performance while a active member of original era Kiss, I'm going to go with Black Diamond. And I'm glad he had whatever fit it took to take that song away from Paul, because it's just fantastic. My runner-up would be Nothing to Lose. So, love his vocals, love Baby Driver. So let's move on. Anyone else got anything to say on Kiss era?
I'll only say, speaking of the Kiss era stuff, I really want, if it really does exist, I want that drum solo from Strange Ways.
The 7-minute
Come
drum
out there.
solo.
He's gonna quit the band if he doesn't put that in there.
All right, so let's move on. We're post Unmasked now, I guess, as we're flying through Peter's career in 30 minutes to cover his first decade, even with a few songs being playing. So, Out of Control.
You skipped the solo album.
Oh my God.
How could you, Julian?
I'm fired. All right, 1978, solo album.
There you go.
I mean, I alluded to it earlier. I found it a difficult listen when I was younger. What about you guys? Alex?
Oh, I remember being a kid and pulling out my dad's records and first just staring at the covers. But I remember the first time hearing any of the songs, I remember hearing Jumpin' the Jeans Radioactive. So once I heard the intro to Jeans Radioactive album, it was like, well, I don't know what to expect. So, the Peter Criss solo album, it's different, but it's Peter. I mean, my dad was telling me he was more jazzy and stuff, so it fitted. Is there any material that I would have tossed on a Kiss album? I mean, maybe I Can't Stop the Rain as like that ballad for the album.
Oh, God. Best song on the album by a freaking mile. I Can't Stop the Rain is just perfection for me.
Oh, it's a great track. The album's different. I've always liked You Matter to Me. It's definitely, because I like that pop beat. I grew up, listening to all sorts of that music. So, not a Kiss album, definitely a Peter Criss album. I enjoy it. I've got like 6 tracks that I always stay on my phone from the album. And I like Thompson and Turin. I thought that was really cool that he did that.
Jay, what about you?
Well, I'm not a hater when it comes to the solo album. It was difficult for me, being a Kiss fan in the 70s, to wrap my head around that album. But in retrospect, looking back at it, I actually really appreciate the fact that Peter did something completely different, because really the whole idea, or at least that was my understanding, the whole idea of these solo albums was to do things that might not necessarily have been Kiss-worthy, or whatever the case may be. To me, the whole idea behind the solo albums was to show another side of who you are musically. And, Gene and Peter kind of get railed on a lot for their records because they are so far and away different than Kiss records. But I think that was kind of the idea. So depending on how you look at it, I mean, if your expectation is, where's the Kiss songs? Well, put on a freaking Kiss record. I kind of feel like those albums, Peter's album, even though, he only really probably gets a very small fraction of credit for songwriting and direction, but still, I think it's pretty brave, really, when you look back at it. At the time, I was kind of detached and didn't really play it much. But I think I Can't Stop the Rain is a great song. I actually think Kiss the Girl Goodbye is a really well-written song. I like just about everything on that album to one degree or another. There's nothing there aside from maybe I Can't Stop the Rain that blows me away. But I don't think there's anything on there that sucks, except for maybe You Matter to Me. Sorry, Alex. But apart from that, I think it's actually, it set out what it was supposed to do, which is make a statement outside of Kiss. So for that, I give it props. I don't have an issue with it.
And if Tommy ever goes into the vaults, I would love, love, love to hear the Peter version in crystal clear quality of Spotlights and Lonely Nights. Oh yeah. My God. When you listen to... oh, yeah. I mean, just the emotion, and he's not that great of a singer, but the emotion that he packs into that song, I mean, Peter's voice on there, Yeah, that's probably the best outtake from all the solo albums for me. Lonnie, what about you in '78, Peter?
Well, I guess my first exposure to Peter's '78 solo album came when I bought a bootleg copy of the Largo show, and he sings "Tossin' and Turnin'" on that show. I think I got the Largo bootleg before I even bought Peter's solo album as a kid, and so when I went and bought Peter's solo album, just collecting the Kiss albums over the years when I was a kid, and it didn't do a whole lot for me. Obviously, when I first listened to it, none of the solo albums did a whole lot. I can't say none of the solo albums. Gene and Peter's didn't do a whole lot for me as a kid listening to them because it's not what I was expecting. And I guess if I was a kid in '78, I wanted a Gene album that would have been just 10 God of Thunders or something like that. And for Peter's album, like Jay was saying, it was very brave what he did. And it expressed his personality that wouldn't and couldn't be expressed on a Kiss album. And as a kid, I didn't really care for it, but as I go back and listen to it as an adult, I have a better appreciation for it, and you can see Peter's personality reflecting out as I've gotten to know who Peter Criss is better over the years. And I can't disagree with you guys at all that I Can't Stop the Rain is just magnificent. It's maybe one of the best songs off of all the solo records, and it's just an album that to me has just grown on me with time. Because I think when I first bought it, I listened to it once or twice, and it's like, I gotta save my money to go buy another Kiss album because this is what I'm looking for. but now as I listen to it, I have a better appreciation for it.
When I first became a fan, I couldn't find this album in stores in Binghamton. I ended up having to trade something like Metallica's Master of Puppets and a couple of other albums for it, and I got an original '78 paper label copy of it. Remember having my Walkman with me at school. I put it in, enthusiastic. What the hell is this? It was just, I couldn't believe that sort of music. I've pontificated or waxed lyrical about I Can't Stop the Rain, but I want to ask each of you, Tossing and Turning, performed live on the Dynasty Tour. Was that the right song from Peter's album to perform live? What would you have picked? Alex?
Oh, I gotta look at the track list real quick. I would have done like Hooked on Rock and Roll, That's the Kind of Sugar Papa like. I really, it's also turning for like the novelty act of it. It's cool. I mean, I remember like, I think it was Tim Mills on the podcast made fun of kind of poke fun of, because I think he saw one of the early Dynasty shows and he was there. And he said like it was weird for him with them going doing a doo, 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 doo. And so like that was kind of weird. I mean, now you can look back and go like, it's kind of cool. But I think like Hooked on Rock and Roll, That's the Kind of Sugar Papa like could have definitely had a cool live vibe to it if they done it right.
Lonnie, what about you?
Hooked on Rock and Roll, I think would have worked so much better than Tossin' and Turnin', and for the life of me, I can't figure out why they chose. So let's do the cover song that's on Peter's solo album for the song that we do live on the tour.
Real quick, that means you had 3 cover songs on the Dynasty tour because you had 2,000 Man, New York Groove, and Tossin' and Turnin'.
Exactly. And don't get me wrong, I don't have a problem at all with them playing New York Groove, and I think that song obviously just works fantastic live. But you're playing 3 cover songs on that tour then.
You have 4, actually. You got King of the Nighttime World.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
This again.
Now we're going to get crap this week, Lonnie, for not knowing our facts.
Burns us again.
Just because I got this really old copy of Sports Arena in today to see if it was better quality. So that was right on my mind as I just listened to that right before the show. Jay, what about you? What should have been performed live from it?
I agree. I think Hooked on Rock and Roll would have been a good one. I think that That's the Kind of Sugar Papa likes would have been a good one, and maybe even I'm Gonna Love You. I mean, maybe one of those 3. Just as far as their adaptability to the Kiss sound, I don't think anything else would work. I mean, as much as it would have been awesome to have Peter come out and do I Can't Stop the Rain, and as much as I love Kiss, that song really, I don't think Kiss could have ever delivered on that song live, unless it was pre-recorded in the same fashion that Beth was. But that's a long song, so that's a lot of time to sit there on a stool and throw roses. So, yeah, I'd have to agree with the rest of the guys. I think Hooked on Rock and Roll probably would have been the best choice.
I agree. It's at least got rock and roll in the title, and I think the rest of the band could have at least performed it. So, there we go.
I will say, Kiss could have had the opportunity to have done I Can't Stop the Rain in 2003 at Kiss Symphony, but they didn't.
They weren't gonna do that though. Come on.
Oh, heck no! I still love like that big Australian guy with the Gene Simmons whole album T-shirt. He's like if they don't do Dirty Liver, I'm gonna scream bloody murder.
Kiss fans, you gotta love us, and I don't think they would ever have done That's the Kind of Sugar Papa Likes to the kiddie audience in 1979. Gene would have been in no. What that suggests, forget it. All right, so 1980, he's out of the band. August of that year, Out of Control is released, and this is one of my. I don't know if it's a guilty pleasure to like this album because I find it just to be an incredibly well recorded, balanced, written, and produced album. So I'm not going to call it perfection because obviously it didn't do a thing. It was buried. I thought By Myself as a single choice from that was pretty poor. And if you think of who had a hit with You Better Run right around the same time, Peter kind of missed woulda, coulda, shoulda with that. What do you guys think about it? Jay, let's start with you.
I agree with you 100%. I think that Out of Control, again, is kind of a left turn, maybe from what Kiss fans were expecting. But at the same time, it's Peter making a statement. I thought David Wolpert did a really good job maintaining quality control and giving the album some continuity. Because as good as, or bad, depending on your preference, the 78 solo album was, there was still, it was a little hodgepodgey. You had like a horn section in one song, and then you had like this big, grandiose, almost cabaret-style ballad, and, it was kind of all over the map. Whereas Out of Control is a more distilled Peter Criss. Everything there's a little more continuity there. And I think the songwriting is better. I think like you said, the studio quality of the recording is really well done. It's really a shame the album didn't get an opportunity to get the kind of backing that it deserved. I don't think it would have catapulted Peter Criss into the stratosphere of stardom, but it certainly would have maybe aided him in doing something better later. Well, Let Me Rock You just basically nobody saw it. So I actually think the album's really good. I think for me, Feel Like Letting Go, that by far is to me the standout track. It's almost comparable in some ways to I Can't Stop the Rain, as far as that it's got a lot of great atmosphere. It's very chill, and Peter's vocals on that are probably my favorite on the album. And when you consider how drug-addled Peter Criss was at this point, it's actually pretty impressive that they were able to get good performances out of him vocally. Now, I don't know about his drumming on that record because I know there are a number of session players that also played, so who knows what he played. But as far as vocals are concerned, for the most part, I think it's some of Peter's best vocals.
And it's so consistent from start to finish. That really is the key. I mean, David Wolfert gets a whole bunch of songwriting co-credits on that. But, if he, really narrowed the focus of these songs down and, nailed the arrangements, it's just a great album. Alex, what about you?
I like Out of Control and There's Nothing Better. And those are kind of like the two standouts for me. I never heard much of the album until actually pretty recently. I mean, I've heard it before, like they have on YouTube, but they have that one and Let Me Rock You both on Spotify. So I've listened to them. Again, there was just no promotion. I think even Peter mentioned on his in his biography too, the lack of when it came out, it just kind of was there and gone. So.
Yeah, and by then Casablanca had its own issues as well. So there were a ton of bands. I mean, read Larry Harris's book. I mean, they were just pumping out material and just record and release and forget about it. I mean, Eric Carr's Lightning album falls into that category. It was just, here, put an album out for the sake of putting an album out. So, Lonnie, what about you?
I think the album makes a great statement from start to finish, with starting off with By Myself. He's really just telling the story about where he's at in life at the time, and Out of Control, There's Nothing Better. There's some really good demos of There's Nothing Better and Out of Control that I like even better than what's on the album. I think they're a little heavier and a little ballsier. But it's probably, of his solo material outside of the 78 album, it's probably the album that I probably listen to the most. I think it's the best songwriting on it and the best vocals on it. I wonder how much Peter actually remembers of this recording process because of his
demons.
His demons at the time. I kind of probably about as much as Black Sabbath remembers recording Heaven and Hell. They said they have no recollection of that.
Except Heaven and Hell is a pretty good album.
Yeah, exactly. But I bet Peter has very little recollection of recording the album. But I think it's probably my favorite outside of 78, like I said, and I think the whole album just makes a statement, and it's really a shame that it really just became white noise and just fell to nothing as quickly as it did, because I think it's a fine album. I don't think it's great, but I think it could have been the start of something for Peter, as opposed to just his solo career just tanking afterwards and falling into basically nothing.
It's weird though, because I remember just before before Out of Control came out, I actually remember reading a lot of press. I remember hearing a lot about news pertaining to the release date. I even remember America's Top 40. Casey Kasem did actually took time out of his program to put a little picture of the Out of Control record and talk about when it was coming out, and that Deborah Svensson was the sort of the model on the cover of the record. And so there was a little bit of build-up, some steam there early on. I just think that once the record came out, that's kind of when they just shut the gates and sort of let it sink on its own. But he had the Tom Snyder appearance. He had a couple of news appearances out of makeup, and there was some build up there. I just don't know what happened after.
It's a shame they didn't put the Tom Snyder on Kissology and instead did that CNN little piece. The album cover, the art's great. I love it. This is another one I picked up in Singapore when I was living there. Found it on cassette, and I played and played and played that tape. I just couldn't believe how much I was really digging that material. You Better Run, which I didn't know anything about it being a cover. I thought it was just an awesome song. Where Will They Run? In Trouble Again. Great album. Very consistent all the way through. And I agree with the comments, though, about There's Nothing Better than Out of Control. The Dynasty demos are way better. But we're lucky nowadays. We've got the fully produced demo reel from that, so in crystal clear quality, which I think sonically sounds better than the production on this. Out of Control. There's a couple of outtakes from this as well. Could It Be Love? And You Could Be Mine, which is terrible. But Could It Be Love is the same quality. I'm going to play a few seconds of that. Don't know. Could it?
I'll give it. It's better than a Love Bite demo from Love Gun. I'll think.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of the two songs that we've heard that didn't make the cut. I can completely understand why. The intro to that one, incidentally, sounds a lot like some of the bumper music that the Sid and Marty Krofft used to use for some of their variety shows like Bigfoot and Wild Boy and Electra Woman and Dinah Girl. So check the theme songs from those to get some point of reference, because there's a lot of similarities there.
But that's certainly better than this. Oh, that's all I can handle of that.
All right, that's enough.
Yeah, that's the other one. So, I mean, the interesting thing about Out of Control is apparently Stan and Peter were fighting with David about the mixes, and they would sneak down at night and remix the album to their liking. So you get the release version, and out there is, I think, 8 of the songs, their version of the mixes. So collectors, again, head over to YouTube and find some of the alternate mixes of this stuff. There's demos of both of those outtakes as well as the fully produced versions. It's a pretty wild album. And I can't think of anything else to say about Out of Control.
I think we've covered the bases.
So now we'll move into a commercial. Actually, they're not paying me to advertise, so...
I'm a St. Louis guy and I'm a Budweiser guy, so I love it.
Here's to you.
So, that is, of course, cat piss. I'm sorry, that is the Budweiser... The Budweiser commercial. Back in the early 80s, for anyone who's not aware, just about everyone and their dog was recording the Budweiser theme. There's a great one of Ronnie James Dio doing it.
No way, I've not
It's
heard
no
that.
Paul Stanley Folgers commercial, though.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
yeah,
man.
Ronnie does it. I picked up a couple of reels that had this, obviously. It had a short version, a 30-second and a 60-second. It had the Bus Boys, and there was a Leon Redbone one as well, which I no longer have. That's out there. So there's a whole ton of artists who did that. So that kind of just is a segue in between Out of Control into Let Me Rock You. Let Me Rock You, guys. Jay.
Not a fan at all. I mean, definitely not a good follow-up. I think it's very reflective of what was going on in Peter's career as a whole around that time. Totally neglected, only got a European release. The songs, I think, suck. Honestly, I think it's probably the worst Peter Criss related release that I can think of. I hear a lot of Peter fans kind of cite that as his strongest, and I just don't see it. I don't, aside from Tears, which is an amazing song.
Vinny.
Yeah, Vinny. Aside from Tears, man, I mean, the rest of it I think is terrible. I think Destiny, horrible. One of the worst songs on the album. But I would say, it's got doo-wop in it, for God's sake. I mean, Let Me Rock You, the title track, is just abominable. I think it's horrible, and it's really a shame. Because you would think, having this star-studded cast of players on that record, that there would have been better writing to go along with it. But it's just a hodgepodge mess, and I can understand why the U.S. never saw that release at the time.
So I think they got the titles of the albums ass backwards. Out of Control should have been called Let Me Rock You, and Let Me Rock You should have been called Out of Control. So...
Out of good songs.
Yeah, if you go by the material and kind of how it all works, I will say Some Kind of Hurricane and Feel Like Heaven are kind of standout tracks for me on the album. Obviously, Gene Simmons wrote Feel Like Heaven, and that was one of the first songs recorded for The Elder. Well, before they went off on that tangent anyway. Alex.
Wasn't feel like Kevin kind of recycled with I'm an Animal too?
Totally. Gene took his lyrics back and
Gene's good at that.
Yeah, recycled them for Kiss on Sonic Boom as I'm the Animal or whatever I'm an Animal.
I have to agree. I think the only saving grace of the album was Tears. Again, another ex-member of Kiss song done by another ex-member of Kiss. I don't know how that one got to Peter, but he did a great job on that track. I just wish there would have been 9 more other Tears.
Yeah, and here we go again. I said it with Out of Control. You Better Run was a hit for Pat Benatar. Tears was a hit for John Waite.
Yeah.
So 2 strikes, Peter. Lonnie.
It's bad. I mean, let's be honest. It's just a bad record. I said that Peter's '78 solo album, I didn't like it at first, but it grew on me. I didn't like this when I first heard it, and I don't like it now. It's just a bad record. It's a mess, and like Jay said, I think it's just it's a window or a picture of what was going on with Peter Criss at the time. That he was, as bad as the album was, Peter Criss himself was falling apart at the time too, and I think the record company did the citizens of the United States a favor by not releasing it in the U.S. and not subjecting us to it.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know what else to say. I think that sums it up.
Yeah, if anybody hasn't heard it and you want to save yourself the $7.99 on iTunes, just go get Spotify and you can listen to it for free and see what we're talking about.
And yet the CDs sell for a ton of money now on eBay, which is really weird. Let Me Rock You, I got it at the same time as Out of Control. I gotta say, I do like it. Let It Go is, I think, a good song. There are moments on this album that are decent. First Day in the Rain makes me want to vomit. Peter Criss covering John Lennon, I'm sorry, makes me want to vomit.
No.
Tears, I think he does okay, but I gotta say, I do prefer Vinny's demo for that song. I think that's Vinny's song, and he kills it, whereas Peter kind of kills it the wrong way. Move On Over doesn't do a whole lot, so there's a couple of cool outtakes from this album as well. I mean, Jim Borge wrote Bad Boys. There's I think a demo of that is not really a demo, it's just a screwed up copy from someone's tape. But here's a little bit of a song that didn't make it called Rock and Roll Survivor. Okay, so that's a bit hodgepodgey like the rest of the album. So,
I will say I remember hearing a demo of is it pronounced Jenny Lee?
Jenny Lee, his daughter.
That was pretty okay. I don't mind that as a demo.
I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, if the Barry Manilow demographic was the plan, that song would have been perfect. And I don't mean that hatefully. I'm not a fan of Barry. I mean, the song actually is pretty well written, and it, but I think had it been on the record, I don't know, maybe it would have been okay. But yeah, it's not a bad song, and actually Peter's vocals on those 2 versions of that demo that I've heard are pretty decent. Especially when you compare it to everything else on Let Me Rock You, because his voice just sounds tired. He sounds tired. He sounds half in it. It's very disconnected from Peter as a person. At least I don't get his persona, not necessarily as the Catman, but I don't hear Peter Criss in those songs. It's almost like someone handed him a karaoke disc and said, "We're going to record you singing over this music." There's no cohesiveness to the sound on that album.
So if I recall correctly, Tears was the single issued in Australia, Japan, and most of Europe, backed with, I think, Jealous Guy from this album. So it was released everywhere basically except North America. I think Mexico got it as well. So here's a little bit of Jenny Lee, the guitar version.
I'm going to love you, baby. You always be my Jenny. We would spend our days together, you and me. Everything would be right.
So obviously his daughter had been born around the time. I think she was born in 1981. So, whatever. A piano version and a guitar version of that song. But
There's potential. I think that had a little bit of potential. Maybe a good producer could have made that, into something a little more. I think it was okay.
or it's a song that's just for her.
That could be too.
All right, let's get out of the the early Peter Criss solo era or errors, and move into the dangerous or the desperate men who became the Alliance, and that is Peter reunited with Stan Penridge for a while in 83, 84, and I don't have any of these queued up. There are 2 bunches of demos, 7 songs in total. On the drive I'm using right now, I don't have the early set of Telltale, Valentine, Run for Cover, Time of Our Lives, and Blame It on Love, but since they're not that good, to be honest, you can head on over to YouTube to listen to those. I do have a bit of one that I'll put it as a guilty pleasure. I do like Baby Hold On from the later set that have circulated for more years. So here's a little bit of Baby Hold On for those who haven't heard it.
Gonna be the same. Tell me that nothing gonna change. So honey, believe me. Oh, take this one last chance. Finally, it's really true romance. Yeah.
So
Was that the dude from the Daisy? Did he roll into the studio sessions? Life in the Woods. That was hilarious. That one came out of nowhere.
So that's a guilty.
What the hell was that?
That's a guilty pleasure. I actually love that song. I think Peter's only the vocalist in the Alliance, which is he's got Stan Penridge, Alan Woody, Benny Harrison, and Tony Mercadante, with him on that. So that's some pretty serious session players. Jay, let's get this off your chest here. Rip it apart.
From that sort of ambush vocal line at the end of that clip. That was just hysterical. It sounds very dated, but again, everything from that era, for the most parts, is very much of its time, at least on an audible level. But I'm not a real fan. I think this kind of period of Peter's activity shows a certain level of desperation that seems very uncharacteristic of what I think Peter was, where his head was even at musically. I think he was just kind of trying to jump on whatever train was going to take him back to the arenas. And so there's kind of a half-heartedness in a lot of these things in the 80s and even early 90s that I have a hard time really loving. But yeah, not a big fan of Alliance.
Alex.
It's forgettable music. There was no. I had some of the demos you were talking about, the Run for Cover, Telltale, Valentine stuff, and it just wasn't anything that I think was going to get him back on his feet, kind of a thing again. Sorry, Peter. Peter, I love you. You're a great drummer and stuff. You were going through a rough time, and it's cool. I excuse you. Don't. It is what it is.
Now, he toured with the Alliance in this period, so they were performing. I would expect maybe some of this stuff, maybe some covers. I've never heard any Alliance bootlegs circulate out there. I know there's a 1984 show at the Cherrycroft in Newton, New Jersey that circulates, and that's the only early 80s Peter Criss solo show, and that's just mainly 50s and 60s covers. I mean, I'd love to know what they were actually performing in their set, since this is their studio stuff, whether they did any of this stuff live or whatever. What do you think of it, Lonnie?
I got to disagree with you, Jay. I don't think it was him trying to get back into playing arenas. I think it was him just trying to get back into playing a high school gymnasium at the time, because he wasn't playing anywhere. And Julian, I don't know what their set list was, or I don't know how many shows they played together with the Alliance, but I think he was desperate. I think he was willing to do anything to play a gig and to prove that he wasn't living under a bridge, even though that story hadn't come out yet, I guess, at the time. But I think he was looking to do anything to get his name out there, that there is a Peter Criss, that he still exists. And I think he was pretty much at the end of his musically, what else can I do to prove that I can do it without Gene and Paul?
Yeah, I've just looked up that Cherrycroft set, and they did all covers: Mustang Sally, La Bamba, Rebel Rouser, Youngblood, Pretty Woman, Money Money, Johnny Be Good, Kansas City, Roll Over and Beethoven. Oh God, Tossing and Turning, Blue Suede Shoes, a couple of songs I didn't know what they were, and Tutti Frutti. So it's all out of the 50s and early 60s, which would have been Peter's era, and Stan's for that matter. So the Alliance, I guess it, maybe is fortunate that it didn't go far. But he and Stan fell out for one reason or another, and he moves on. And he hooks up with a band called Jane, who renamed themselves Balls of Fire. Have you guys thoughts on Balls of Fire? Other than I remember seeing. Now we're into when I'd been a fan, and I see pictures of Peter Criss and Hit Parader wearing some Michael Jackson type jackets, and it took a few years for me to hear the music. And well, Jay. Jay, we lost your voice.
Oh, there we go. Sorry.
There you are.
I think there may have been potential there. I'm not particularly crazy about the songs. Again, I think it's one of those things where it was just a slow climb trying to get people to notice him. Obviously, that band was not built around Peter at least in its original incarnation, but I think they capitalized on his involvement once he joined. I do remember seeing some things in Hit Parader about that band shortly after Peter joined. And, when you look at the pictures of some of the promo shots of them, I mean, they look like a legit band of that era, and they seem to have a little bit of muscle as far as getting shows and whatnot. So there may have been potential there, but I'm not particularly fond of anything that I've heard, and I've heard very little.
Yeah, Jane was supposed to be the star of that band. I mean, there's a couple of songs. I think there's 3 shows that were recorded in '86. The Whiskey, the Palomino, and I never remember what the third one was, but they come under so many different names that you're out there. Lonnie, have you heard them?
I've heard them, and it's just, I don't know, it's just not my thing at all. I think I've seen the picture of Peter Criss in the Michael Jackson type of jacket, and I think you can take you could do one of your polls on the FAQ, which I know you guys are such a big fan. You're such a big fan of all the polls that go on. But
God, shoot me now, please.
Who looks more ridiculous, Gene in the asylum area or Peter Criss in the Michael Jackson type of jacket?
Oh, I thought it was going to be who's better, Balls of Fire or The Who. So, I mean, you look at some of the pictures.
What are you trying to say about the polls?
Some polls need to be euthanized. But you look at Peter in some of these pictures. I mean, he's got his salt and pepper hair going, and the rest of them it looks like someone's dad stepped into frame.
They're so ridiculous.
So
ridiculous.
I mean, the one positive is they did Feel Like Heaven live. And if you listen to these live recordings, there's one where someone's, shouting out Kiss songs. And apparently Peter's getting really frustrated. You can hear him start cursing and swearing behind the kit.
No.
He's
getting upset?
He's going nutso because, the fans are there thinking it's going to be a Kiss cover show, which I guess means it didn't have a chance. If you head over to the FAQ or even search the internet, there are some great photos of this band. And Peter's outfits... it's mid-'80s. It's California. It's dangerous, some of what he was wearing. And it's very Spinal Tap, some of the photos from this era.
Yeah.
Alex.
I'll read a line from this great book. Page 237. The guys from Atlantic walked out, and that was the end of Balls of Fire.
It seemed one issue of Hit Parader here. Peter Criss has joined a new band. The next episode, Peter Criss has left the band.
I will give a funny Alex story. I remember being like 9, and my friend Thomas and my neighbor, they had the Alive 3, and they had that family tree chart. Mind you, we were 9, and we just saw the Balls of Fire on being little kids. It says balls. That's about as far as it goes for me with Balls of Fire.
So this takes us through the end of '86. And then, oh wow, I'm actually reading along to one of my book manuscripts. So, '86, he does some work in the studio with Gene Simmons and Tommy Thayer, Best in the West, off of Black and Blue album. So, that's nice. Next, then he goes and does a little bit of work in the studio with King Cobra, doing some background vocals off Take It Off. Next, I think 80...
In his book, he says 89 he got with Mark St. John.
Well, before that, he shows up in a Kerrang article in 87, 88, I think, or that he says he's writing with Vinnie Vincent. So, obviously nothing that we know of ever came of that, which would have been really interesting. So he went for the next Kiss guitarist, Mark St. John. And invariably it's been called The Tree or The Keep.
I guess besides Paul and Gene, I guess that makes Peter Criss the next member that will have performed as every member of Kiss then. If he's had all those connections.
Yeah.
Benny, Mark, TV Unplugged, Tommy.
So I guess we're into the into the Criss era, because Mark St. John is prototypical of that era. What did you guys think of? And let's try and start with The Keep and Mark St. John as the guitarist, as much as possible. But basically, Peter replaces the drummer in White Tiger. It's the same vocalist, it's the same bassist, same guitarist, and Peter. And they start putting together some pretty heavy metal. What did you guys think of that early stuff? I mean, Love for Sale, one of the first songs, Between the Lines, Do You Know What I Mean, which is another one of my all-time favorites. But Jay looks ready to fall over. Jay.
Well, I'm not a fan of Mark's playing. I'm not even a fan of his playing on Animalize. So, I think the singer on I guess that would be, The Keep. Some of the recordings there, dude sounds just like a heavy metal Harry Carey. He really does. He's just, his vocals are really overwrought, way too forced. I think the songs really just don't have any kind of, there's no hooks there. I think maybe Bad People Burn in Hell, which, I don't know, is that The Keep, or is that...
That's Criss, that comes later. That's Phil Naro.
Well, I know he did demos with maybe Phil Naro, and they did an early version of that song, so maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit. But, yeah, I'm not a fan of The Keep at all. I just thought that it was way too way too obvious. I don't know. It sounded very contrived. Not a fan.
I'm trying to cue up a song here. But the vocalist, Michael McDonald, was David Donato, I believe, just with a different name. Makes me think of Jim Gillette, Nitro. I mean, do you guys remember the histrionics and over-the-top, scorching operatic? Let's cue up Between the Lines, I think might be a good one just to chuck in here. I don't know what the sound quality is. We'll find out. And by the way, I think the White Tiger album sucks, and that's not much better. But that being,
I didn't mind the single off the White Tiger.
Yeah.
The single's alright. It's like a remix of it. Other than that, yeah.
oh, the Michael Wagner remix.
Yeah, Rock Warrior. That's not bad. I don't mind that song. It's the only song on that album that I can stomach.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna get to play my favorite, which is "Do You Know What I Mean," which is a Lee Michaels cover. Which I just love that song. I like the original version too, but I like the rocked out one. Okay. I like it. I don't care what anyone else thinks.
I think he's going in a better direction than what he was a couple of years prior to that, though. I mean, at least he's back into more of a rock and a metal type of sound as opposed to just farting around with all the other 60s and 50s doo-wop type sounds. And at least he's trying to connect to his fans and what Kiss fans of the 70s were probably listening to at that point. In time, I think he was at least on. I think he's in a good direction. Maybe it was a misguided direction, but I think he was on the right path.
But was it honest? Is that Peter Criss's music?
No, it's not honest.
Or is it totally trying to shoehorn Peter Criss's name and voice into something that might resonate with a record buying public?
That's exactly what he's doing. That's exactly what he's doing. But I don't know. I can connect with that more than I can connect with the other stuff he was fooling around with.
So after Mark St. John, I mean, that didn't last long. There's a great interview with Mark over at the Kiss Asylum that was done years ago that explains all the challenges that happened to that band and, you know, some of the issues that led to the breakup. But immediately after that, it basically becomes Criss. And that is Peter. His first vocalist was Phil Naro, who's Canadian. A great songwriter, great melodic sense, and I think he really helps the material in that it's much more focused. It takes a little bit away from the angry bumblebee guitar and starts actually having songs behind it. What do you guys think of the early Criss stuff? And that gets into, you know, Blue Moon, Bad People, Wait for the Minute to Rock and Roll. You know, it's just good time rock and roll to me.
Yeah, I like Bad People Burn in Hell. It's not, you know, and I saw Peter on, I guess it was late '95 before I saw the Bad Boys tour, and he was doing a lot of songs off of Criss and off that EP and the album itself, and he did Bad People Burn in Hell that night. And, you know, I dug it, and it felt honest, and it felt like Peter Criss, and didn't feel forced like the other stuff did. You know, I feel like. But at the same time, I was saying, I think it pushed him into the direction that the Criss album ended up being with Blue Moon Over Brooklyn, and that I think Blue Moon Over Brooklyn is a really honest Peter Criss song. You know, it's about his isn't it about his mom dying?
Yeah, totally.
And you know, and it's a very honest Peter Criss song, and it's heartfelt, and I think it's Peter kind of finally, after fooling around with 2 solo albums and then jumping from band to band to band, that he's kind of got his feet on the ground and in a direction, and he actually, you know, eventually gets a tour with Ace Frehley, you know, after that album finally comes out. And I think Peter's finally, after I guess it was really 14 years of being out of Kiss, has found himself as a solo artist.
Jay.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, like you mentioned, the Phil Naro stuff, actually, it's not too bad. Phil's definitely a better singer. I think the songs maybe sound a little more genuine than they did with The Keep. And I think the early version of Bad People Burn in Hell is actually pretty cool. And I actually like No, I'm Not Afraid, just because it's so very different from anything else from those sessions that we've heard. And there's definitely some creativity happening there, and I definitely think that it helped pave the way for some of the songs that would end up showing up on the first Cat EP.
Yeah, I can't remember if it actually did happen, but I thought on Mitch's A World with Heroes iTunes version that they actually released the demos for Wait for the Minute to Rock and Roll as a bonus track. So I'm going to play a little bit of that, as it was the band's closing song. Phil had already gone by the time the band started performing live. That was I can't remember his name. God. Well, here's a little bit of Wait for the Minute. And since you mentioned it, No, I'm Not Afraid, which is also Phil Naro on vocals, a little bit of that. So, as I've said for everything, better sounding quality versions of these, since I'm playing these on my laptop into my external microphone, are available on YouTube. But Phil Naro, great songwriter, great vocalist. I think he really brought an edge to Peter's material, or at least to the band, not necessarily Peter's material. But it was more melodic, less Bumblebee-ish. And then we get into the Cat EP. Or the Criss EP, which had the Cat, What You Doin', and a few of the songs that really, Peter's metal Peter by then. Alex, what did you think of Criss? You know, the stuff that was released, I guess.
I remember picking up the Cat number 1. I was at a used record shop, and I paid like $6 for it. And I like Bad Attitude, Blue Moon Over Brooklyn. Excellent track. There was really that potential to make with Peter to have a good rock album. And I will say, I love that acoustic version of Best that they did on the Cat number 1 EP. I thought it was pretty cool. But I like Bad Attitude and Blue Moon Over Brooklyn. I love the you can feel the emotion in the song. I think that's what made that song a great track.
Yeah.
The Cat number 1.
Really good song. Lonnie?
Yeah, I like that too. I think I was skipping ahead a little bit the last time I talked to this. But I really like that album a whole lot. I think Show Me, it ended up on the full length, is a good song too. And I got it over here. What else is on there?
Do you ever see the video to Show Me?
No, I don't think I have, no. You're going to tell me to go do homework again.
No, we don't do homework here. But go to YouTube. Sorry, Mike.
Like the Truth and Strike even. I think they're decent songs, and I think Peter was kind of finding his direction and connecting with not only his fans but doing songs that he was comfortable doing that were rock at the same time. I mean, I enjoy the album actually.
All right. So after anyone else got anything to say on Criss?
We still talking about the EP, or are we talking about the full length?
Full length.
Yeah, actually, I think it's a decent album. You know, it's really probably the closest thing to mainstream exposure that Peter really got after the whole 2 failed solo albums in the '80s. So on that level, it was nice to hear Peter again. I actually remember doing an interview with him. I saw the ad for the EP before it had even been released, either in like Spin or something. I don't know.
You could order it. You could like pre-order it on Hit Parader or something.
Yeah. It was like a 1/4-page ad, and I was like, "What?" Because I had not heard a word about it. I just stumbled across it. So as soon as I did, I started doing some digging and managed to get a hold of, I think Carol Kay was his manager at that point, Ace's former manager, or publicist rather, and did an interview with him, and he really built it up to be something great. I was a little let down when it it did finally come out. I thought some of the songs were weak. I'm not a big fan of The Truth. I think the Cat song from the EP that luckily did not make it to the full length, I think it's a horrible song. I think the little swipe that Peter takes at Gene and Paul came across bitter, not clever at all. And I thought it was kind of a juvenile attempt at trying to one-up the guys. But I thought What You Doing off the EP was actually one of the better songs, and it's really a shame that it didn't wind up on the full length. But I saw him 3 times on tour that pushing the full length. Saw him in the Toy Tiger in Louisville, and saw him twice in Indiana, I think, Hammond and somewhere else. But and they were actually really good live. I think Mike Stone's got a cool voice. I thought it was nice that Peter and him traded off, so it wasn't the Peter Criss show 100% of the time. Showed a little more diversity in some of their songs, and I thought Blue Moon Over Brooklyn for sure was definitely one of the standout tracks on there. And I remember him, saying in press releases how important that song was to him. So it's cool.
Yeah, it's a very good album, and I remember being surprised by how solid it was. I thought the band just worked together. I thought the vocalist was good. The stuff Peter sung was good. The stuff Mike sung was good. Good guitar work. Solid album. So, I was trying to find a song to play off one of the other Phil Narrow demos, but I can't find it. So that wraps up Criss. Of course, they came to a shuddering halt in December '95 along with Ace's band when the reunion was announced. Peter back in Kiss. I guess we only have one album really to talk about with him, and that's Psycho. And there's only one song to talk about. What do you think? I finally found my way to you. Alex?
I love the alternate take version with the horns. I'll leave it at that. It was cool to hear him singing the song again, and then he had a Kiss album. I was, 98. I was 9 when the album came out, so I didn't know the whole politics behind it. But it was cool that there was a new Kiss album, and Peter was singing the song. So,
Jay?
Like I said, the alternate take, which you can find now on YouTube and stuff, I thought the horns were pretty cool on that version of it.
All right, Jay?
Yeah, I know this song is kind of widely reviled by most Kiss fans. There's always heated debates about how the varying degrees of suckage on this song. I don't really have an issue with it. I mean, when you think about the context of Psycho Circus, even though later, we discovered that it really wasn't truly a Kiss album in the way that we were expecting, the fact that the whole album is kind of a rally cry and sort of a tip of the hat to the fans and back, and this is what we believe, and it's all these cheerleading songs of Paul's. I thought the sentiment of I Finally Found My Way was a very nice touch for the record. It was nice for an acknowledgement of the fans in a more personal setting, rather than the Paul Stanley Pepsi commercial cheerleading kind of style of songwriting. It was nice to hear, even though Peter obviously didn't write that song, but it was nice to have kind of an honest song on there that was maybe a little more intimate and a little more thoughtful, along with We Are One, which is not a huge favorite of mine, but again, I like the sentiment of it. I thought maybe it was more effective than some of the Paul cuts, lyrically at least. So I don't take issue with it. I think the string arrangement on that song is great. I think aside from Peter's little off-key final note on I Finally Found My Way, which makes me cringe every time I hear it, I thought his vocals on that song were actually really good considering his age and how much time had passed since we had heard him singing a Kiss song. So I don't have an issue with it.
Do you think that last note might have been on purpose? Emotion?
I don't know, man. I don't know.
Lonnie?
I don't know. It's a Paul Stanley song, let's be honest, and it was very predictable. I mean, you knew what was going to come. They weren't going to let Peter sing a song like Baby Driver on the album. It wasn't going to be Peter singing a rock song. It was going to be Peter singing a ballad because they're going to try to recreate something from the past like Destroyer to have Peter sing a ballad on it. I mean, I knew that as soon as that they announced they were going to go into the studio. That's Peter's going to get one song and it's going to be a ballad, and this is what it's going to be. And Peter only plays drums on one on one track on the whole album. He's very, very absent on the album, to be perfectly honest. And, and he does sing on that horrible song, "You Wanted the Best, You Got the Best." But that awful.
Is dreadful. Utterly dreadful.
So, it's to say it's Peter on a Kiss album is a far stretch, because he didn't write the one song that he sings on, and he only played drums on one track. And Into the Void's a good song, and you can definitely hear that it's Peter Criss on that track. And if you listen to the other songs, there's a different feel to it. But it's fine. But it's a Paul Stanley wrote song, and we'll get into what he brought into Psycho Circus, and you can see why it was a Paul Stanley song.
And that I'll say is one of the positives for me out of this song. I hate it. But having Paul Stanley do some harmonies with Peter was something different. So that's the only thing I can really say positive about the song. I really don't like it. So I agree with Alex that some of the alternate versions that surfaced a couple years ago or last year, whenever, are a little bit more interesting. But number one, I don't think it's a very good Paul Stanley song. I think it's way too contrived. Paul Stanley and Bob Ezrin trying to write a song for Peter that sounds like Beth, and it just fails on so many different levels. Yet, as Lonnie said, when we talk about the material that Peter brought to the sessions, you can only talk about the one song we've heard, which is Hope. So we're going to jump ahead a little bit to One for All. Now, should Hope have been on Psycho Circus, or was the correct call made?
The right call was made, and I'll tell you, I hadn't listened to One for All in a while, and I knew we were going to do this. So, on my way to work yesterday, I put in One for All, and I didn't make it all the way to work before I had to turn it off, because I just couldn't take it. It's as much as I... Let me rock you. One for All might be even worse. It's awful.
It's dire to you, but can you say something? Can you say one positive thing about it other than the album finishing?
Well, I haven't listened to it from start to finish. I can't. So,
I mean,
it's heartfelt, and you can tell Peter puts his heart and soul into it. You can tell Peter really, really wanted that album to be something special, just by the way it starts off with his story about 9/11. That it really came from Peter's heart, and he really, and he talks about it in his book, that he was so disappointed that the album did not live up to his expectations, because I really believe he put his all into it, and I think that's why. And the album came out in 2007, this is 2015, and I think he was so disappointed in the album's the way it was received that he, as much as he talks about doing a rock album, I don't think he can get himself back in the studio. I think it really hurt him how much that album just tanked and how much Kiss fans diss on it. But to say something positive, I think Peter gave it his all. He really did give it his all.
Yeah,
he gave it his best shot.
He wears his heart on his sleeve all the time. I mean, can you say that the album cover's fantastic?
No.
What about his choice of covers then? He's got a bunch on here.
Send in the Clowns.
Send in the Clowns. What a Difference a Day Makes, which is a classic. Heart Behind the Hands, which I guess is technically a cover because it comes from a musical. Anything else on there? Any of those? Good choices, bad choices?
It's all bad. It really is, And I'll tell you what, when that album came out, I felt horrible for not liking it because I wanted to like it so bad.
I did too.
I was more upset that I didn't like it. I've almost felt like a shitty fan for not liking it, because usually I can make excuses for some of my favorite bands' lesser work, but that was an album that was just unforgivably bad. And really, honestly, I think the album could have been at least twice as good as it was, which is not saying much, but if there had been some quality control, because there are tons of issues with pitch. I mean, it's almost like everything was done in one take, and they said, "Yep, that's an album," and just threw it on the shelves and called it done. It is so poorly executed, and you would think with the kind of lineup they had musically to play these songs that it would have been like, whoa, a whole different Peter Criss. I have so much more appreciation for his talents, but honestly, all that it did was reveal just how limited his talents were, or maybe not even talents. Maybe it's his limited ability to see himself in an honest way and look at that and go, this is kind of shitty. We got to clean this up and do something with it. He seems so completely out of touch with what is considered good. I'd have to say it's probably one of the 5 worst albums I've ever heard in my entire life, and I can't say that about very many records. But yeah, it's absolutely abysmal.
Alex.
You know, my favorite thing about my copy of One for All was it was autographed. That's fine. I was so excited because I was the day after my 18th birthday. There were a couple of tracks. I liked the One for All track. I didn't mind Hope. It wasn't like the greatest song ever. The Faces in the Crowd. I hate the fake audience sound they did with it. I thought if I could get a version without the audience sound, it'd be a decent track. And I like Space Ace. I guess just about Ace. I didn't realize it was negative at the time, but it was about Ace. And then another fun story. I went through a breakup back in November, and I remember I would listen to Sin in the Clowns like on like repeat and stuff as I was moping around for like the first few days and stuff, just because it fits the mood and stuff. But you know, I feel the passion that Peter has, and if that's really your style of music, like What a Difference a Day Makes and stuff, then, you know, you've got something going on there. But, yeah, I mean, it's not, I don't think it's, like, terrible, but it's I don't think it's what anybody expected when Peter went to go do, you know, his first solo album, post-Kiss, you know, 3 years after really leaving Kiss, I guess, at that point, 4 years. And the cover, the cover looks like, you know, he called up some high school kid and said, hey, can you go on Photoshop and Microsoft Paint and make this? I think the back cover, I'm looking at it right now on KissFAQ. I think if you did like the back cover, the track listing was, if that had been a cover, it would have been a greater cover for the album. But
I'm still trying to figure out the symbolism of the biplane on the front cover, because
yeah,
I don't want to get into the design. When I listened to this album the first time, I didn't even get the electronic press kit or access to it, so I heard it when everyone else did. I had a flashback to 1987 and being in my school locker after receiving the 1978 solo album and putting it in my Walkman, and I was like, what the hell is this? I gave it a bunch of listens, and I gotta agree that Faces in the Crowd as a song, as a sentiment, I get. That's probably the only song on there I get. Send in the Clowns, I always thought would be a great song for someone from the band to cover, but this isn't the one that works. Maybe Gene should have a shot at it. What a Difference a Day Make is probably the only other song on there that does anything for me, just because it's, you know, an important song. I get his story that goes along with it, that he remembers it being played around the house, so I get the connection with that. It's a classic, but the rest of it does not work in any way. The out-of-key singing really bothers me, and I feel bad for him that no one said, Peter, we need to do another take of this, and play it back for him. Here is where you're not hitting the note. It's not working. It's not coming across right. Because there's times in music that a wrong note does sound good, but it's not in every song on an album. Someone should have said, Peter, we got to recut this one. It's just the quality's not there. He really needed a third point perspective on the album, because I think a lot of the stuff could have been a lot better, whether it was an arrangement or an execution, irregardless, actually, of it being an honest album. If this is all Peter on his own with, Charlie Kipps, you know, doing this, he still needed that extra perspective, and I think he would have done himself a better service to have listened to someone, give him some honest criticism, because I don't think he went out there wanting to put an album out that was going to have people essentially laughing at him. I don't think that's right. I don't think it's not unfair to laugh at it, because it's holy shit, someone of his stature has put out an album that really does not have the quality. But the album had hope. So
he should have had a producer. I mean, I'm looking at it says it's produced by him, but a producer. I was reading a book and the guy used this analogy. A producer like a dentist, that they'll either pull something out, drill it, or fill it, or if at best polish it. And the fact that it's the patient there doing his own dental work on himself, you're not going to want to pull your own teeth out, so you leave it in there and stuff. And he should have had at least a producer, somebody to go through, like you said, and just give that outside perspective and go, hey, why don't we redo this real quick? Let's do it one more time.
And it shouldn't have been created by email. I mean, Mike Angel did an interview with us when the album came out about emailing things back and forth. No, there are times that you really got to have all your musicians in the same room so that you can see each other's faces, so that you can emotionally connect with the stuff that you're trying to record before you necessarily go in and record it separately. You got to have a basis rather than piecemealing things together and trying to shoehorn all these different tracks into one song. So,
And at the same time, it's Peter Criss. He's not going to deal well with people telling him, "Hey, this isn't good. You're going to have to do better than that." Well, this is my solo album. I'll fire you.
I totally agree with that.
It's Peter Criss, and he's not going to. He doesn't deal well with criticism.
So bring a lot of Christmas trees for him to shoot.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, though, because I do, obviously none of us were there, but I would imagine if you were a fly on the wall, I think maybe the reason for the lack of quality control wasn't the ineptness of the people there in the studio with
you had a bunch of yes men around.
Was Peter probably insisting that this is my, and especially after leaving Kiss the second time, now he even probably feels like he's really got to prove something, because fresh off the farewell tour, well, I guess fresh off the Australian tour, and so maybe he felt like he had something he needed to prove, but man, that was not the way to do it, for sure.
So we're coming up to 8 years since this album was released. He's only really doing monster conventions now. I would love to know, what does Peter Criss think of this album now? What does he think could have made it better? What does he think, if any, and it's his album again, as you say, were its shortcomings?
Well, even in his book, I think he said that he was so devastated that it didn't do well, and like he had gone back and listened to it, and he didn't understand why it didn't do well. I mean, despite the vocal issues on it, and despite all the problems with it, and the song selection and the production on it, that I don't think he understood even a couple years ago when the book came out why it did so bad. I mean, in my mind, I think that he believes that it's a great album and that he got screwed again.
Yeah.
Everyone's out to get him. So do you think this might be why we haven't had any music from Peter
I think so.
in 8 years? We've heard of the legendary rock album that Richie Scarlett recorded bass for.
John Five did some
John Five did some guitar work. Angel again did a bunch of guitar for that. So apparently it's in the can, and Peter continues to tinker with it. So we've got that, which, I mean, I would love to hear another Peter Criss album. I mean, this is 2015. He's going to be 70 in December. So, time is not on anyone's side for him putting out an album. I know his breast cancer has become a central part of his life. That's probably more important at this point than music, but I would still like to hear some new music from Peter. I'd like to hear him rock out, because he's got a great rock voice. And I'd also like to hear the legendary jazz album. He's talked a lot about these jazz influences that he wants to record. I mean, he's mentioned Sing, 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 a lot of the Krupa stuff. I'm not that well versed on jazz. I would like Peter Criss to give me a introduction to jazz from his perspective. His takes on some of the jazz greats that, influenced him or that he thinks are worthy of people checking out. Cross-pollination of genre. So I'm going to come from a rock perspective. Peter, tell me what jazz to check out and show me some of it. So I would love to hear both of those projects come to fruition. I mean, he can jazz drum, well past 70, but rock, I don't know.
Yeah.
Jay, what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, if this this legendary unreleased rock album really does exist, because I think, I don't know where I read it, I think somebody even at one point asked John 5 if he, basically to confirm what they had heard, and it was my understanding he was sort of like, I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't recorded any songs with Peter Criss.
Yeah, John said he hadn't done any work yet on it, but that he'd been approached.
Right. So who knows whether this is just folklore we're talking about.
But Richie has been in the studio and he's confirmed that he cut 12. I think it was 12 tracks. So he's confirmed that he did do work.
And if that's the case, I hope it comes out. I mean, I think Peter's rock voice is still intact. I think a good glimpse of that would have been You Wanted the Best, You Got the Best, where you get to hear Peter kind of rip it up a little bit. And he's still got that edge. Granted, that was a good while ago as well, so who knows where he's at vocally now. Obviously, I think his drumming would maybe not even come into play on a rock album at this point. But I'd love to see Peter do it. I don't know whether he will. And maybe the reason for the long gap is that maybe he got real with himself and realized, I need quality control. I need some people that are going to shape up my ideas into something that's maybe a step higher than what I could do on my own. And maybe it's being passed through a number of channels, for tweaking. I mean, hopefully that will be the case. Hopefully coming off the One for All debacle, which, God, I don't know how anyone could recover from that, but I would love to see Peter come out, for the better after that album. So I'd love to see a rock album from him.
Alex?
I'd love a rock album. Peter, for the song tech, I'll take an EP, 4 songs, iTunes. Throw a couple tracks on iTunes, and I'll be happy with it. And like you said, jazz. I think if you look at the 78, that's what was cool with the 78 was it was him. So, if he's like, hey, I don't want to do a rock album, but I've got a jazz material. Cool beans, have a good producer, or at least somebody that can say, hey, let's tweak this real quick, and then put it out there, and it sucks that, the record industry is the way it is with getting CDs released, but, I put it up on iTunes.
Yeah, he doesn't need a record label to do it. That's the whole thing.
Right.
The music industry, for the disaster that it is for many of the legacy artists, for people who don't have a contract, for people who don't have anything to lose, it's a great industry nowadays. Do it themselves.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't see iTunes or Apple going, arguing because I am Peter Criss, or Rock and Roll Hall of Fame original drummer for Kiss. Can I, release some songs on iTunes? I think they'd welcome him openly.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. If he's got something that he owns that he can put out, he can put it out. I mean, look at Vinny. Vinny managed to put the Euphoria EP out on iTunes. So the way iTunes works is in favor of the artist who has control of his catalog. So he doesn't have to ask permission of Universal, and go down on his knees. So, he can do it. Anyone can do it. Not just Peter Criss. You don't have to be a legend to put music out on iTunes, because there's a whole lot of shit out there as well.
Yeah, so Peter, I know we probably, if you listen to this, and, you got a few tracks put up on iTunes, $4.99, I'll buy it. You only get $5 out of me.
Lonnie, what do you think?
I think you get $5 out of most Kiss fans if we put something up on iTunes. I'd like to hear another release from Peter Criss. Like you said, he's going to be 70 years old this year. I would like to hear something else from him so that One for All isn't the last release we get from Peter Criss.
Yeah, hallelujah on that.
Let's have a better bookend to your music career. And I know that the breast cancer scare and what he dealt with and dealing with everything with charity events surrounding that is probably more important to him at this point in his life. But considering who he is and what he means to millions of fans and what he means to just the rock industry, I would really like to hear some of these tracks that Richie has done with him. Even if just choose the best 4 or 5 of them and put them out as a rock EP, just as and make that it. Just something else, because you influence so many people in your career and in your life. Give us something. Give us one more thing from you musically that kind of just puts a bow on your music career, instead of just giving us one for all and it just being just downhill at the end, and you can see like why it ended. Just give us one more strong release.
Yeah, well, I love to hear the rock album and it's Richie on bass, not on guitar. I think one bookend that is possible is the recent Peter with Ace and Eddie Trunk. I think was it Scott Ian? Did you guys catch that?
Yeah, I did. Hooligan. It's awesome.
Yep. So he sounded good. He looked good. But again, it's down to what he feels. So no pressure, Peter. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear some music from you. And hopefully we will. So I did dig up one track that we were talking about earlier. Here's one of the earlier Alliance tracks, Telltale Valentine.
There were times that I could say I've seen this loving eyes filled with pain. I've seen it written on her face. Chase is never ending. I can trace the fingerprints. I can place the evidence. No, I can change what happened since I've had this Valentine.
All right, so that's a bit of Telltale Valentine. I think
I'll say real quick, I just picture like the sweet epic 80s, like the guy broke up with this girl walking in like an 80s show, but that song playing in the background.
so like a little bit of an aha treatment on there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was thinking,
I mean, it's not so bad. That sounds very in tune with what was happening in that period. So at least it sounds timely for what
Very
it was.
80s.
kind of Halls and Oatesy, I thought, but we skipped over two other Peter Criss related things. Before we wrap up, let's touch on Scoff. All of the Scoff demos are out there, except for one from the prospective second Criss album. Scoff, of course, was the members of Criss who replaced Peter with the drum tech. So they recorded an album which was primarily material that would have been on the second Criss album, with stuff like I'm in a Band, The Shooter, Adeline, and that's Jason Ebbs on vocal rather than the Mike Stone. So that's out there for people to check out. And if you go over to Kiss Monster, we've got it on Peter's discography, little 30-second samples where you can go listen to the full versions over on YouTube. And the other thing, of course, is also, this is an official release, One of a Kind, which was Mark Montague and Angel McLaughlin, who put out an album in 2005 that had 3 songs that are attributed to Peter as a co-writer: Golden Arm, You Gotta Know, and The Shooter, which is, of course, that same Criss song I just mentioned. So those are 2 other things that you can seek out. You can buy One of a Kind, the full CD, and it's actually, I liked it enough at the time it came out. And you guys, you heard this?
Some of those Criss demos with Jason Ebbs, there's some strange stuff in there, you know. And even though I'm not a big fan necessarily of any of those songs, I think My Reality, Seeds are some of the ones that pop in my head. But man, I'll tell you what, Ebbs is a weird guy anyway. So you can tell it's the Jason Ebbs show. But I can appreciate the fact that, you know, if that had come out, it would have definitely been a bold statement for Peter, because there is nothing else like those songs anywhere else that you'll find in the Peter Criss related canon musically anyway. It's very left of center, kind of quirky, kind of grungy. So, you know, I mean, I don't know if necessarily would have done him a world of good career-wise, but it's nice to hear something just completely out of left field for Peter.
Yeah, Jason's a really cool guy, very creative, very artistic, and there's a reason why one of his bands was called, I think, Twisted Roots. You know, he will mix a whole bunch of influences into one thing. So those are worth checking out if you want to hear some stuff that could have been Peter Criss. I guess let's wrap it up. So let's have some final thoughts on Peter Criss, the music of Peter Criss. Your high points, summarize it. Alex.
Peter, love the music very much. minus the low points, you've got a lot of high points. There's a lot of high points in Peter Criss's music that I think legacy-wise always trump even the low points. From Black Diamond to Strange Ways to Hooligan, for the Kiss stuff, even some of the stuff like Let Me Rock You, There's Nothing Better, Tears, and even Blue Moon Over Brooklyn, and even even One for All have, at least for myself, a couple things that did stand out. So I think that's the great thing with Peter Criss. Even through the negative stuff, he still has that good stuff that you can't deny it. You just can't deny it.
Jay.
Well, I think Peter is maybe at times justifiably maligned as sort of the bastard child in the original Kiss lineup, but at the same time, he's the OG drummer, and what he did in Kiss alone, as far as I'm concerned, is all that matters. Now, I will say at least one thing about Peter's career, for better or worse, nobody had a more diverse career path in the Kiss family, without a doubt. I mean, the man covered everything from psych to doo-wop to country to AOR pop, disco. I mean, he's touched on all bases, big band music, the whole nine yards. So in that respect, I give Peter props, whether it was intentional or not. You can certainly find a lot more diversity in Peter Criss' career path than you might in anyone else in the Kiss family. So for that, and you're an awesome Kiss drummer, and I'll always love that about Peter Criss. The band would not have been nearly as good without him in those early years, for sure.
Lonnie.
Peter Criss isn't my favorite member of the band, and I don't know how many Kiss fans, if you talk to 100 Kiss fans, if any of them would tell you, well, Peter Criss is my favorite member of the band of all time. But but at the same time, Peter gave them the song Beth off of Destroyer in '76, and if not for Beth, who knows what would have happened with Destroyer, because it wasn't doing well at the time, and it made Kiss into a mainstream band for everybody. And maybe if you ask somebody in '76 or '78, when Kiss was at their highest and Beth was at the top of the charts, people might have said, Peter Criss is my favorite member of the band. And we talked that he only wrote or co-wrote 4 songs for Kiss in his entire career, but he made his mark as the Catman, and those vocal performances on Baby Driver and Nothing to Lose and Black Diamond are legendary. Like the scream he lets out during Nothing to Lose, during Black Diamond, and the scream he lets out during Baby Driver, just epic, and you can just feel the passion. And he has influenced so many drummers because of what he did in Kiss, and he's a rock legend. And like Jay said, we talked about the stuff that he did, from Lips and Chelsea to what he did with Kiss to what he did with Alliance in the 80s, and he did so many different things, and he's extremely talented. And at the same time, I would love to hear just something more from him.
Agreed. Peter Criss, you're an icon. You are the original drummer in Kiss. You're not a carbon kitty, and that's not to denigrate, Eric Singer now, but you were the guy who invented those riffs for the band. You're the guy who drummed on all the classic albums. You're the one whose voice was on those early albums. So, it's impossible to not, tip my hat with respect to you. You introduced me to a whole bunch of different styles of music, some of which I didn't necessarily like, but I still got to hear some of where you were coming from, even if I can't connect with it. So I hope that in the future we're going to hear some more music from you. I would also love to, have some of this unreleased stuff that we've referenced today released in proper quality and through the proper channels, so that those who wrote and performed on it, get paid their share. We've enjoyed it for decades in some cases. So it'd be great to have it officially out there in pristine quality. But as I think a lot of us find out as we get older, health is the key thing. So if breast cancer is going to be the bookend to your career of letting men know that we can also suffer from breast cancer, and it's also a great battle to fight for the women in our lives, I can live with that. So, Peter Criss, this episode was about you. We salute you. Thank you very much.